Hello, everyone, and today is a new episode of this podcast with Anastasia Stoyanova, and I'm going to talk about very interesting topic today, and I'll share my experience of taking and passing IELTS Academic. So, as you all know, that if you want to study or if you want to get a professional license, and if you were not born in an English-speaking country, for example, I was not born in Canada. I immigrated to Canada, but I was not born here. So if I want to, let's say, go to college or go to university, or if I want to obtain a certain professional license, I have to take IELTS academic test. And that is quite a challenge, even if you are a professional teacher and if you dedicated all your life to the English language. So let me tell you a couple of things about IELTS Academic. I made a draft of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'll, first of all, in the first part of this podcast, I'll share with you regarding the exam, and I'll share the overall impression and how I felt. And then in the second part, it will be kind of more technical, and I'll talk about some of the things and some of the topics that I was lucky or not so lucky to have during the exam. First and foremost, I'd like to say that I took this exam many years ago. It's almost like 3 years ago. So it was in September 2022. So September 2022, and it's like the certificate itself is no longer valid. But at that point, I needed that, and not to study in Canada, but for a professional goal. I had to obtain a professional certification as a tesol Ontario instructor, English as a second language instructor. So that was one of the requirements. So back then, that was the exam that I was working with. I was teaching other people, so I knew the criteria, I knew the structure. But personally, I had never taken that before. And I think it was a very good experience overall, because one thing when you teach it, but then another thing, you have to take it yourself. Of course, it requires a lot of money. I think it costs like about $300 or even more than that, I think. Like I said, it's been a while, and all the material that I'm using today, I'm using the note that I made back in the day, in September 2022 when I was taking this exam. I came home and I wrote a very, very detailed note regarding the topics and the way I felt. So that was a good idea. But you know what? I never kind of wanted to make a podcast about that, right? Back then, I was not making any podcast. So it's a good idea just to share that with you guys. And without further ado, anyway, you know that IELTS is international language testing system of the English language. And there are two modules. There is a general module that people take usually for immigration purposes. And a lot of governments, including the Canadian government, accepts IELTS general module as an immigration certification. But for other purposes, like studying or maybe some professional certifications, you cannot take general module. And general and academic modules are very different. Topics are different, the structure is a bit different, and writing is different. So my goal was 7.0 in every skill, and I achieved that goal. So that was like 7.0. So you should know that it's advanced level, because there is this whole IELTS system of points if you want to just check it out or use AI and ask and convert it into levels, right? Quite handy. So for me, I take pride in my result, because that was an amazing result. And honestly, if I just open it up on my phone right now, I haven't checked it before, but like I said, it's been a while. But I remember that I scored at least 7 because I obtained my license, my professional license, and I've been practicing and teaching this exam and teaching so many other things here in Ontario since then. And the exam, the results are only valid for 2 years. And then if you need it again for some reason, you would have to retake it. And it costs a lot of money, time, and stress. And for me, despite the fact that I am a professional English teacher, I was super stressed. I was very stressed. Yeah, so my result, I'm looking at my notes right now, was overall advanced level, C1, according to the European framework of English languages. So for a Canadian level, that would be also like advanced level or CLB 8, 9, right? Or higher. Because there were some skills that were higher than advanced. For example, in listening, I scored 9.0, which was the maximum. And then reading, and I'm looking at the academic module right now, I scored 7.5. And writing was 7.0 and speaking was 8.0. So as you could see, nothing is lower than advanced level, and it's basically a range because my overall band score was 8.0, which is like on the boundary between C1 and C2 level being the highest. And honestly, one thing you teach and no criteria, and then another thing you actually practice for exam, because I did not have much time to practice for exam. I had 2 jobs back then. I did not have much money. I did not have much time. So basically my personal practice time for this exam was minimum, but it's just because I didn't know the criteria and I was teaching, so I was able to take it. And for whoever is considering taking that exam, if you have a choice and you can take a Canadian, let's say, academic language test instead, maybe for some, per certification or professional purposes, I think you should take Canadian academic English test exam. Later, 2.5 years later, or I think almost 3 years later, I had to take Canadian academic language test for other purposes, but that's the topic for another video. So yes, my overall score was 8.0, which was amazing, and I'm proud of my results. I think the most stressful part for me was speaking part, because the examiner was a very important guy. He was like the head of the committee of the IELTS committee, so basically one of the most important examiners in Toronto. And he ended up scoring me at 8.0. I think it's a superb result, but it's just I feel that IELTS is really not just about the language, but also about practice, and sometimes it's very hard to score really well at speaking or writing. And you could read all kinds of forums about that, and it's just my personal opinion that even a good English teacher who's been learning and practicing the language for many years found it very hard. So I personally found it not easy at all. So I think it's just that there's always like some kind of inner perfectionist in me. And I wanted to practice, but, life gets in the way. So I want to share with you now. So overall impression, if I can summarize that, I think speaking was really stressful, and a lot of the times the job of an examiner is to also make you feel relaxed. But in my case, I was not so lucky because the guy who, I think his name was David or something, I don't remember. He was like the top head of the speaking committee here in Toronto, in Ontario, and you could see that he was very tough. He was a tough examiner. And that's what I've heard after I actually left the room. I heard people like speaking and gossiping about that. But you know what? Like, I have the skills, I have the courage to say that my speaking level has always been close to a native-like proficiency. But that's not just to say that I'm lucky or anything like that. It's been just hours and hours of hard work that you put in. I think it works this way when it comes to every skill in life. So as you know, now I'm going to get into technical things like the exam structure and just a little bit of the topics that I had. By the way, there is a huge difference between the computer version of the exam, digital version, computer version, and the paper-based exam. So I took paper-based exam, because back then, for me, I think I did not practice much handwriting or anything like that, but it's just something I was also teaching, and I was aware how to do this on paper, using paper, and I actually bought the books, and that was like this. And my first tip kind of regarding the exam format is that you should practice in the format that you are going to take your exam in. What I mean is that if you're planning to take your exam as a computer-based format of IELTS academic exam, well, you should practice using your computer and using computerized versions of paid tests. For me, I bought books, I practiced, and I was writing with the timer a lot. Not as much as I had wished, but yeah, it was good practice. So the first part was listening, and listening usually consists of 4 parts. They start off quite nicely and kind of easily, but then the topics start getting harder. And like the first 2 parts are more casual, but in the third part, you could hear conversations between students or 2 workers. In my case, they were discussing presentation and assignment. The hardest part when it comes to the listening and the reading on IELTS is that you have to sometimes fill in the gaps, and that makes it harder if you compare with Canadian academic language test. When it comes to format, that's a bit more straightforward, I feel like, and you always have a choice there, and like almost, I would say, the minimum number of tasks where you have to actually type something or write something. But on IELTS, yes, you have gaps. So it's not just like you have A, B, C, D, multiple choice, so you got to be prepared. And in the last part of the listening, I had a lecture about teaching music to children. So you see, not that easy, not that hard, but usually it's more from the academic perspective. When it comes to reading, so the reading also had passages with many tasks. Like the first one was about fungus and oyster mushrooms, and then there was something about construction or architecture. Crazy stuff. In the second passage, I had a text about science fiction and what should and should not be considered one, and also some of the analysis of the works of sci-fi, like Huxley, for example. And then I think I liked passage 3 task most of all because my topic was about brain power exercises, and especially they mentioned Aerosmith Young School in Toronto. And you know what? Like, it's been several years and I realized that, oh my God, and I actually live not so far from this school. Yeah, the text talked about neuroplastic approach and how brain can actually be improved at any age. So it's very interesting, but very hard. So guys, prepare, read as many texts as possible. Work with your teacher and work in the format with your teacher. And I'm always available to provide you with some consultation regarding that. So you feel free to reach out and we can schedule a paid consultation. And I can, be your teacher and be your mentor, as always, ready to help you guys. Let's move on to writing and speaking. So writing comes next. And in task 1, usually you have some charts or some graphs, and they show some information that you have to compare and contrast. In my case, I had the charts with the information on average house prices in London and England. I should also mention that, by the way, I kind of skipped that, but that's an important thing I wanted to mention, and that's good that I remembered that. In the listening section, IELTS Academic has all kinds of accents because IELTS exam has all kinds of accents. So if you expect to only hear North American accent, like for example my accent, I have always tried to imitate and to practice North American accent, for example. But that's not the case, so sometimes you gotta be ready. Not sometimes, but if you go and take IELTS academic exam, be ready to hear all kinds of accents, right? Like not just standard RP, but all kinds of English accents. And that makes it harder as well, the listening part. So for writing, sorry about that. That was like a side note regarding the accents. But in writing, yeah, So there were 2 charts with information on average house prices in London and the rest of the country, I think. Sorry, not the rest of the country, but London and England. And so they were comparing 2 years, 1995 and 2013, and you had to, what you have to do, right? You have to work with the main trends and then get into specifics a little bit. It's a very hard task because this task makes you learn lots of phrases, and sometimes it's not just about phrases. It's also the skill of working with such kind of data, visual data, and how to analyze that in a very short period of time. So that's also a separate skill that you got to work on. I was kind of lucky because my essay topic for an academic essay was cool, I would say, and I wrote down that my topic was as follows. Something that it's important to teach school children the science of food and preparing it. Others consider that there are more important subjects at school. Discuss both points and give your opinion. So, and these are just, as I'm saying, I cannot disclose all of the specific, topics and what I had. So this is just some kind of approximation. And as you know, that there can be so many kinds of essays, right? It's not just about discussing both points. Sometimes it can be, do you agree or disagree, and some other types that I usually discuss in my lessons, and you need a certain structure to write. And then speaking might happen on the same day with an examiner, or it might happen on a different date, but you have to arrive really early, and it might be a stressful experience as well. For me, it was. And the speaking consists of 3 parts as well, and usually the way it goes is that the examiner sees your level, and then they kind of understand that, okay, that's not a beginner, right? We are aiming for upper intermediate or higher. So they always start off with some kind of easier questions, and then they adjust the level of the questions, and then they can choose which questions to ask. And so, of course, one of the first questions was, where are you from? What do you like about the area where you live? And of course, I was answering also about Toronto, because that's where I was living and where I do live, or am living right now. And then the topic kind of went like this. He started asking me about public transport and whether or not I was happy about it in the area where I live. And so the question was like this: what kind of public transport is there in the area where you live? Is it going to get better or worse, in your opinion? What are the pros and cons of public transport? So that was part 1, and that concluded part 1. In part 2, you know that there is a card with the topic, and you have like a little bit of time to prepare, and then you have to speak continuously. And when I say continuously, I tried to speak, and then he wanted more, and he was gesturing. So you got to make sure that you speak until the examiner stops you, and until you kind of exhausted yourself, and ideally exhausted the topic. That's what it is about. So in my case, we kind of segued into a completely different topic, because it was about a photo, describing a photo that I was proud of having taken. Who was in the photo, where, when it was taken, why it was important to take that photo, and why I was proud of this photo. So that was like this. Kind of tough, right? But I came up with something nice. And I was talking about the photograph that I took of my mom and the rest of the family. And, it was one of the last Christmases that I had with my mom almost 4 years ago. And before, I decided to come to Canada. That's kind of sad, which reminds me that, Christmas time is always sad. And the last part, anyway, was digital photography versus traditional photography. So that kind of photography, what are the advantages and disadvantages of digital photography? What can we learn about history and culture through a photo? Wow. Would you be able to answer that in your native language, let alone in a foreign language like the English language? That was also not easy, guys. And then there were a couple of other questions like, what can digital photography replace a traditional photography? Why not? Is digital photography losing its value? These are just some approximate questions that could be, asked. And of course, you can never predict what kinds of topics. It's a funny question because sometimes people come to me and they ask me, hey, Anastasia, teacher, help me, give me the topics. I want to know all of the topics. I want to be ready, 100% ready for this exam. But guys, come on, it's really impossible because the topics change all the time. What you can prepare is the format. If you know the format, you can always score better, for sure, because you know what to expect. You know how things are going to go. So knowing the format can help you, can calm you down a little bit. But the rest is on you because you got to know the language, and ultimately, not only just the language, but you also have to be an educated person, right? Because the whole purpose of taking this exam is showing that you have a good outlook and a nice vision when it comes to many things in life. And that can be very stressful experience. So that's why I think all of the teachers might understand me, because a lot of the teachers, we postpone this exam, taking the exam, right? A lot of the teachers are also worried. We are just human beings after all. But in my case, that was a great year, very effective year, because I took those exams and I was I was proud of myself because I overcame my fears and I achieved what I needed to achieve. I got those certifications, but honestly, in the end, it did not even matter because I had this nice CELTA certification anyway. And I never actually got into the, public sector and working in the public sector. But anyway, one certification or another, it's all about experience. It's not just about paper, experience and skills. So for me, I think ultimately that's the most important thing. I hope that was useful for you guys. And I'm always happy to see you in my lessons and to have lessons together. And I want to teach you and guide you and build your confidence so that you are not afraid and you can go and take the exam and pass it successfully. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. And as you know, that some of the episodes are about exams and other episodes are just in general about Canada and the English language. And some of the others are about my life and how I struggle or how I live happily ever after. So just say. So hope to see you in the next one. And enjoy the rest of your day and see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you. Take care.